How is this even possible?
You wake up in the Pacific Northwest expecting just another gray, drizzly winter morning. But instead, you look outside to find your entire town is effectively an island, completely surrounded by water. Highways have vanished under rushing, muddy floods. Giant logs are smashing against bridges like battering rams, and emergency crews are actually paddling inflatable kayaks down what used to be Interstate 5. Families are finding themselves trapped in their own homes as 4 feet of fast-moving water swallows up entire neighborhoods. Rivers that usually drift quietly through Oregon and Washington are now exploding past historic flood levels. It's all being fueled by a massive atmospheric river stretching thousands of miles across the Pacific, coming straight from near Hawaii. This isn't just a storm. This is the specific kind of Pineapple Express event meteorologists always warn us about. A relentless fire hose of warm, heavy moisture dumping inches of rain onto ground that is already soaked, while simultaneously melting mountain snow. Roads are collapsing, hillsides are giving way, and entire communities have been cut off from the outside world. Tonight, we are diving into this chaotic, fast-moving disaster that is turning parts of Oregon and Washington into sprawling inland seas. We're going to look at how it started, why it's getting worse, and what Americans need to learn from a region that is currently fighting just to stay above water. The disaster kicked off with one of the strongest atmospheric rivers the Pacific Northwest has seen in years, a warm, moisture-packed system stretching nearly 4,300 miles across the Pacific Ocean. When this system slammed into Oregon and Washington starting on December 8th, it unleashed a continuous stream of tropical moisture that the region simply wasn't ready for. The first wave of heavy rain saturated the ground. But the second wave, which was even stronger, pushed inland between December 9th and the 11th, turning an already fragile situation into a full-scale emergency. Because the air mass involved was unusually warm, the freezing level in the Cascades shot up to over 8,000 feet. That meant instead of snow falling on the peaks, warm rain was pouring directly onto the existing snowpack. That dangerous combination, heavy rain mixing with rapid snowmelt, sent massive volumes of water surging into rivers, streams, and low-lying communities. Portland International Airport logged more than 1.5 inches of rain in just 24 hours, while the Oregon Coast Range was staring down forecasts of up to 7 inches by the time the storm finished. The ground was already soaking wet from earlier storms, so every new drop of rain had nowhere to go but downhill, flowing straight into neighborhoods, onto highways, and into river basins. Meteorologists at the National Weather Service didn't mince words, calling it a conveyor belt of tropical moisture aimed right at the Northwest. Once it made contact, the real flooding kicked off. Oregon was the first to take the hit, and it happened incredibly fast. As that atmospheric river parked itself over the state, streets in western Oregon turned into rushing canals. Entire neighborhoods near creeks and tributaries were underwater in a matter of hours. Firefighters along Interstate 5, the biggest north-south highway in the region, were suddenly scrambling to perform high-water rescues as cars got stuck in the rising floodwaters. In one intense scene, a semi-truck driver had to be rescued from his cab by crews using inflatable kayaks because the water had completely surrounded his truck, cutting off every possible escape route. Other drivers were spotted climbing out of their windows and wading through waist-deep water just to reach higher ground. Further south, coastal counties in Oregon were dealing with widespread road closures. Standing water stretched across rural towns, and drainage systems were so overwhelmed that even major city infrastructure failed. Portland's massive Big Pipe system, which is designed to keep sewage out of the Willamette River, was pushed past its limit for the first time in over a year, forcing officials to send out urgent contamination alerts to the whole metro area. Cities like Salem and Tigard were scrambling to hand out free sandbags as the water crept dangerously close to homes in low-lying areas. Transportation officials were practically begging people to slow down, issuing urgent warnings about hydroplaning after seeing wreck after wreck on the slick, flooded highways. And it wasn't just the water. The winds kicking up with the storm brought down trees and knocked out power in scattered pockets across the state. By the time the day ended, Oregon looked like a chaotic patchwork of flooded roads, stranded cars, and flashing emergency lights. Every scene was messier than the last, and the rain just kept hammering down with zero sign of stopping. But if Oregon was overwhelmed, Washington was being pushed to its absolute breaking point. Nearly every major river across western Washington surged past flood stage, with some rising faster than officials could even track. The Snoqualmie, Skagit, Skykomish, and Puyallup rivers, usually calm, peaceful waterways, transformed into churning, debris-filled monsters capable of sweeping away cars, livestock, and entire chunks of the road. Forecasts were shouting warnings that the Skagit River near Mount Vernon might top its historic 1990 crest, a benchmark that many locals prayed they'd never see again. At Snoqualmie Falls, one of the state's most iconic landmarks, water levels surged to their highest point since 2015, sending a continuous, deafening wall of white water roaring downstream. Drone shots and eyewitness videos showed massive logs, and even full-size trees with their roots still attached, rocketing down the river like missiles. Emergency operations kicked into high gear immediately. Governor Jay Inslee activated the state's Emergency Operations Center to its highest level, and the National Guard was deployed as desperate calls for help started pouring in from all over western Washington. In Chehalis, a family of 6 had to be rescued from their own home after 4 feet of fast-moving water completely swallowed their access road. Rescue teams had to launch boats and inflatable kayaks right into the neighborhood, navigating between submerged cars and collapsed fences just to get to them. And the chaos wasn't limited to rural areas. Urban centers were getting hit just as hard. Downtown Seattle wasn't spared either. Intersections filled up with standing water, storm drains were completely overwhelmed, and cars were spinning out left and right as drivers hydroplaned through the heavy downpours. Meanwhile, the foothills of the Cascades were so saturated that the ground simply gave way. Mudslides shut down Interstate 90 near North Bend and blocked sections of State Route 106. Transportation officials warned that as long as the rain kept hammering the region, more landslides were likely. Across rural counties like Skagit, Snohomish, Lewis, and Mason, residents had to evacuate as water spilled over levees, flooded farms, and cut off homes. Emergency shelters opened their doors for both people and livestock, with agricultural communities scrambling to move animals to safety before the rising water cut off their escape routes. And here is the scary part. This first wave wasn't the end. Meteorologists warned that a second surge of tropical moisture was already on the way. That meant river levels that had briefly receded could spike again, this time with even less warning. Communities that had just finished evacuating were told to keep their bags packed. The Pacific Northwest was now fighting a battle against time, rising water, and a weather system that just refused to let up. You might be asking yourself, how is this even possible? What made this disaster so destructive wasn't just the heavy rain. It was the perfect alignment of meteorological factors that amplified every single drop of water. This atmospheric river carried unusually warm tropical air, which pushed the freezing levels in the Cascades and Olympics way up, above 7,000 to 8,000 feet. Under normal storm conditions, much of this precipitation would have fallen as snow, storing that water safely in the mountains. But this time, the warmth meant solid rain was pouring directly onto the existing snowpack. That triggered a phenomenon known as rain on snow, one of the most dangerous drivers of rapid flooding in the Pacific Northwest. As sheets of warm rain pounded the mountains, the snowpack melted far faster than usual, sending a massive surge of meltwater rushing into rivers that were already swollen from days of non-stop rain. The result? An explosive, accelerated spike in river levels. Waterways that usually take days to swell were suddenly jumping up by feet at a time, giving communities almost zero warning before roads, bridges, and farms simply vanished underwater. But this rain-on-snow effect didn't just flood the valleys. It destabilized the hillsides. Steep slopes, heavy with both rainfall and snowmelt, started to loosen. Huge sections of earth slid down onto highways, forcing emergency closures on Interstate 90, State Route 106, and other critical travel corridors. In mountain towns, residents actually reported hearing the terrifying sound of the ground cracking and shifting right before slides tore through the roadside forests. Adding to the crisis, the atmosphere was reloading. Weather models showed another surge of tropical air aiming straight for the northwest, a second atmospheric river ready to dump inches of rain on terrain that was already pushed to its absolute limit. For emergency responders, the biggest challenge wasn't just handling what was happening right now. It was preparing for what was coming next. The landscape was soaked, unstable, and dangerously fragile. One more round of heavy rain could push rivers over levees, trigger fresh landslides, and make rescue missions even more deadly. As officials warned repeatedly, the ground simply cannot take any more water. As the flooding intensified across Oregon and Washington, communities mobilized with a level of grit and coordination that showed just how resilient these people are. Emergency crews, from local fire departments to county sheriffs and the National Guard, were working around the clock to keep residents safe. They deployed rescue boats, high-water vehicles, and even private kayaks to reach families stranded inside their homes or trapped on isolated roads. In towns like Chehalis, Carnation, Sultan, and the Skagit Valley, evacuation alerts were lighting up phones late into the night. Families scrambled to gather the essentials: flashlights, medication, blankets, and pet carriers, racing against the rising water that threatened to cut off their escape routes. For some residents, there were only minutes to get out before the floodwaters swept over their streets. Many residents described the terrifying sound of debris, massive logs, and shattered fences, crashing into the sides of their homes as they scrambled to get out. Local fairgrounds and community centers were transformed overnight into temporary shelters, providing hot meals, cots, medical care, and a safe roof for evacuees. Agricultural communities faced a unique kind of stress, working frantically to move livestock to higher ground. County officials quickly opened emergency stables to take in horses, cattle, and other animals that were in immediate danger from the overflowing rivers. But amidst the chaos, neighbors became the real first responders. People with lifted trucks drove into deep water to ferry others to safety. Volunteers spent the night filling and delivering sandbags. Local businesses opened their doors to provide free food, bottled water, and charging stations. Farmers even used their tractors to tow stranded vehicles out of the floodwaters. In many neighborhoods, that community response was the only thing standing between a bad situation and a total tragedy. Despite the devastation, there was a striking sense of unity. Oregonians and Washingtonians were helping each other out, checking on elderly neighbors, sharing critical updates, and refusing to leave anyone behind. As forecasts warned of that second wave of heavy rain, residents prepared to do it all over again, reinforcing levees, checking on one another, and staying alert through a crisis that was still unfolding. For the Pacific Northwest, this wasn't just a storm. It was a test of resilience. And even as the rivers continued to rise, the people facing those floodwaters showed exactly what it means to stand together when nature pushes you to the limit. As the Pacific Northwest braces for yet another surge of tropical moisture, one thing has become painfully clear. This atmospheric river wasn't just a weather event. It was a wake-up call. Oregon and Washington have seen storms before, but this specific combination, warm rain, rapid snowmelt, record-breaking river crests, landslides, and widespread evacuations, has pushed the region to a breaking point few expected. Families are still displaced. Entire towns remain cut off. Rescue crews are exhausted, but they are still standing strong. And with more rain on the way, the next 48 hours will be critical. If you're watching this from somewhere safe, take a moment to think about the communities living through this right now. Neighbors who woke up to find their streets gone. Parents carrying their kids through waist-deep water. First responders risking everything to reach people trapped by rising rivers. These moments remind us how quickly life can change, and how powerful it is when Americans come together to protect one another. If you found this breakdown helpful, and if you want more real-time coverage of extreme weather with science-based explanations, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it so more people can stay informed during events like this. And here's my question for you. Do you think the Pacific Northwest is prepared for storms of this scale? Or does the region need a completely new approach to handling flooding and climate-driven disasters? Let me know in the comments. If you liked the analysis in this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Please share this video with your friends and family. It really helps. And finally, if you found this report helpful, please hit the like button. It helps us beat the algorithm and ensures this truth reaches more people who need to hear it. Thank you for watching.